I'm excited to share a new insight with you today. So, somebody asked me this morning, what happens after we die? What happens to us after we die? And I took him through an experiment, a thought experiment, or you might even call it a meditation or an exercise to make a point. And if I'm right, then that will be a new theory of everything, a new theory of everything. As you know, people are looking for the grand unified theory, this, that, the other. It's called TOE, a new theory of everything. What happens to us after we die? So I should start off by saying that if you are a believer in naive realism, which means that matter is the ontological primitive of the universe, that what we call the objective universe is independent of our observation, which we can't prove, of course, and that the so-called objective universe will continue to exist in the way we perceive it, even if you're not there. And other species don't matter. Their perception doesn't matter. As you know, if we assume matter to be the ontological primitive, then what happens after you die? You're finished, extinct forever. And this was a good experience, somehow created by the interaction of molecules, atoms, force fields, and gravity. Of course, no one can explain how that happens. It's called the hard problem of consciousness. So if you believe that matter gives rise to consciousness, even though we can't explain it, then there is no afterlife and you're dead. When you're dead, you're dead. Now, if you believe that consciousness is the fundamental reality and it is formless and it is without cause and it is fundamental and it is infinite and it is spaceless, timeless, and eternal, and if there is a matrix of conscious agents interacting with each other in that field, projecting their experience of mind, body, and universe, then this exercise might help you. Okay, and also, and I've talked about this in previous videos, but this exercise is new. Okay, so while you're listening to me, and you can keep your eyes open or closed, whatever you prefer, just try and remember what you had for breakfast this morning. And now see that in your mind's eye, you can see the image, who you were with, what did you eat, hash browns, omelette, toast, or whatever, fruit, yogurt. That's what I had. So I'm saying that with the exception that I didn't have the omelette, but I had everything else. But as I recall it, I can experience in my mind's eye that I can hear the conversation, I can see what I ate, I can see who else was there at the dining table, and I can hear the conversation as well. So I can bring forth in my mind the experience of what I had for breakfast. Now think about last night and what you had for dinner, and the same process, okay? And think about something that happened a few days ago. And again, the same process. An image and a sound and a taste or a texture will appear in your mind space, in your mindscape. Okay. Now go back a little further and see if you can recall an incident from your teenage years. Any incident. Maybe your graduation from high school, and experience the same process in your mind's eye, in your mindscape. Let's call it the mindscape. Okay, so now you are experiencing graduation day, let's assume, from high school. Go back a little further and see if you can recall an incident from your childhood, maybe your school, maybe your bedroom, your parents, your siblings, something. Same process, right? Okay. So where was all this memory before I asked you to do this exercise? And the answer is it was nowhere. It was nowhere in a physical form or in a physical object like the brain. Because even as you recall those experiences, even though you're having those experiences, sound, sight, taste, smell in the mindscape, even as you recall that and you can see these things and you can taste these things, and you can remember these things, in your brain, there's only electrochemical activity. There's no experience happening in the brain. No experience ever happens in the brain. Cut a knife through the brain, you don't even feel pain, which is the most primordial kind of experience as a sensation. The brain only shows the neural correlates of experience. Okay, so where was that information before I asked you to go through this exercise? That information existed as para in Sanskrit. Para means beyond, transcendent space. And then it slowly emerged. Why? Because you had an intention and you put attention on that process. Attention, intention. And so that information, those thoughts, those feelings, those images, those sensations, those images, those memories existed in a domain of awareness which is formless. But then it started to come out like a cloud of probabilities, para pashyanti in Sanskrit. And madhyama, you could actually see it. And then you might say, oh, wow. And that's Vaikari, the final step. So in those 4 stages, information, which was memory, also desire, also imagination, but basically karma, memory, desire, it existed totally unmanifest. And then it became a cloud of probabilities. Then you started to see the images and sensations, feelings, thoughts, and then finally you said, wow, okay, that's the process through which that information emerged. And it was literally in the Akashic record in a matrix of conscious agents or souls or whatever you want to call it, okay? Conscious agents that are differentiated from the one consciousness, which is the infinite Akashic field. And you just demonstrated that. Okay, so then where do you go after you die? Well, you don't go anywhere. You're there now. Otherwise, you couldn't have recalled these experiences. You had to go there. In fact, to have any experience, you have to be connected to this matrix of infinite, immortal, timeless, conscious agents interacting with each other. And in that matrix are all memories, your personal memories, so-called collective memories, memories of ancestors, and the whole shebang, okay? Interacting conscious agents in a matrix of existence, but all unmanifest, till you recall them. Unconsciously they're present, but when you recall them through attention and intention, then they surface. In fact, you can't do anything. I've just arrived in San Francisco. I came to the Four Seasons or whatever, and I recognize this because I'm connected with that field. So every experience that we're having is being processed in that field outside of space-time, which is mind-boggling. Although it appears as the theater of space-time and causality, which is the lucid dream in the vivid now, but you're never left home. You never left home. Now, if you understand this, we can explain everything. What is gravity? It's a name to an experience. What are force fields, atoms, molecules? Names given by humans to experience. And then where is the experience happening? Outside of space-time. So if we take consciousness, the ontological primitive, the ontological fundamental reality, then you are recycling or reincarnating all the time. And what is reincarnating is a bundle of selective memories and desires and karma. Karma just means memory and desire and imagination that you selectively identify with. But all that information is in the grid. And the search engine is attention and intention. The search engine, and it's in the cloud, but not in the cloud like we talk about the cloud right now. For the computer, that has a location. This cloud is outside of space-time, and it's processing everything that you're experiencing right now. So are we living in a virtual reality? Yes. Are we living in the matrix? Yes. What is death? It's the termination of a particular continuum of experiences given a story. And the story can recycle and evolve, because you as a person is a process in that recycling matrix of conscious agents and evolving. And there's no hard problem of consciousness. The hard problem of consciousness only exists if you ask the wrong question. It's not a problem, it's a non-problem, because you're assuming matter as the ontological primitive or the foundation of existence, when matter is a name given to by humans to human perceptual activity, which is constantly changing. If the body is changing because the body is part of the scenery, and the scenery is changing because it's entangled with the body. But it's all the perceptual activity in consciousness, and also cognitive activity. You give it meaning and all that, and you create a story. You create meanings, context, stories, and you say, that's me. This is me, Deepak. But Deepak is a process in a deeper reality, in the matrix, and that process is a never-ending horizon. You can choose to recycle, not recycle, go into any other loca or location, and that location is not a location in space-time, although it might appear in a different space-time dimension, but it's a frequency domain of the same matrix of consciousness. So, my friends, you don't go anywhere when you die. You've never left home, number one. And number two, I offer you a new theory of everything. Let me know your thoughts, whether you agree or disagree. And if you disagree, why? And if you disagree and you believe that matter is the ontological primitive, then please explain how a combination of atoms, molecules, force fields, and gravity gives rise to experience, to colors, to shapes, to forms, to insight, to intuition, to creativity, to imagination, to thought, to self-reflection, and to whatever I shared with you. How did matter do that? And if you can explain that, I'll give you a prize.